Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. There's been a strong reaction to Jason Kenney stepping down as leader of the UCP. We hear from both Kenney supporters and critics. Locals and tourists alike are celebrating the fact that Ikiyuko Japanese Garden has reopened for the season here in Lethbridge. And it was Game 1 of the Battle of Alberta, with the Calgary Flames coming out on top. We have reaction from some of the team's star players.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The province is still buzzing following the resignation announcement from Premier Jason Kenney. Kenney announced that he's stepping down as Premier and party leader after only receiving 51.4% support with the UCP leadership review. Kenney says he recognized the division within his party and understands that a party divided against itself cannot stand.
Friends, it's clear that the past 2 years were deeply divisive for our province, our party, and our caucus. But it is my fervent hope that in the months to come, we all move on past the division of COVID.
I am personally sad to see Mr. Kenney leave. I believe that he was a very strong leader and he had the potential to really move this province forward. But the results are what they are, and as a board member, we'll accept them and look forward to the leadership race coming up in the near future.
I respect Jason's decision. It's going to be tough probably going forward for a bit. A lot of people, a lot of work into it, but we need to unite as a party and we need to find a leader that can do that, because right now we're divided. So.
Reaction to Jason Kenney's resignation made its way here to Lethbridge as well. Local politicians commented on the decision Thursday. As BCN's Micah Quinn explains now, there are some who have already put their names forward, vying to become the new leader of the UCP.
I hope that we can have a cordial leadership contest where we recognize at the end of it that we're all going to be supporting each other on a single team. That is going to be my approach.
Former Wild Rose Party leader Danielle Smith says she will be seeking the UCP leadership after Jason Kenney announced his resignation as premier on Wednesday evening.
There is sort of a tendency to think now that I'm decided that I'm going to jump back into politics, seeking the leadership of the UCP, that this is just a continuation of my last political life. And I would encourage you not to think that way, because so much has changed since 2015. I'm a mainstream conservative. I've seen a lot of dialogue going on about whether we are going to be swinging to the left or swinging to the right. We're all Albertans. We all want the best for Alberta. And I think that you will find that my campaign is going to be centered around putting Alberta interests, and Albertans first.
Smith joins Brian Jean as candidates that have put their names forward, vying for the now vacant premier spot. Kenney resigned after receiving only 51.4% of the vote within the UCP party.
Friends, I truly believe that we need to move forward united. We need to put the past behind us. And our members, a large number of our members, have asked for an opportunity to clear the air through a leadership election.
Here in Lethbridge, Mayor Blaine Higgin reacted to the news of Kenney's decision to leave his role as premier.
Our role as council here in Lethbridge is to work with any leader, any level of government, and we want to make sure that we're there at the table. We're building those relationships.
Rachel Notley, the leader of the NDP, says she was unfazed when Kenney made the decision to resign.
We watched them be entirely distracted to the point of paralysis and inaction by that conversation. And we made a decision as a caucus and as a party a long time ago to not let ourselves be distracted or paralyzed by that conversation, but instead to focus on what Albertans need right now.
It's still up in the air as to when the UCP will choose an interim leader for the party. Bridge City News reached out to Brian Jean for comment on his decision to run for the UCP leadership, but we did not hear back before our broadcast deadline. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Independent MLA Drew Barnes of Cypress Medicine Hat says he was not surprised by Kenney's lack of support within the party. Now, Barnes was kicked out of caucus last year after writing a letter to the Premier standing against the government's lockdown measures. Barnes was on his way to Calgary to meet with his former caucus members, and he says now that Kenney is out, he's open to the idea of rejoining the UCP.
Yeah, I absolutely would not join the UCP under Premier Kenney, but I am very much willing and continuing to work for conservative unity, to continuing to work to make sure that the NDP is not reelected. And I would say at this point in time, that if my former colleagues, want to talk about healing for Alberta, healing for Conservatives, I would be all ears. I'm more than willing to do my part to pull this together.
The leader of the Wildrose Independence Party of Alberta has also spoken out following the announcement of Jason Kenney's resignation. 63-year-old Paul Hinman says there was enough turmoil within the party that perhaps it was time for a change. Paul Hinman joins us now from Welling, Alberta. Paul, what do you think led to this point that Kenney only received 51.4% support?
Well, I want to say it starts off with that what he was sharing with Albertans, and the vision that he was sharing was one of I want to say accountability, putting Albertans first. We're going to stand up to Ottawa. We understand the importance of individual freedoms. He was saying all the proper things that I want to say Conservatives understand and realize what makes a country great. They understand the principles and the purpose of a constitution to protect individuals' rights, their life, their liberty, their property, their pursuit of happiness. And over the last 2 years, he's basically betrayed us and went into a socialist, centralist government that says we know how to run your lives better than you do. We'll tell you which businesses can and can't be closed. We'll tell you what medical treatments you must participate in if you're going to function in society. And he put all of these, I want to say, draconian mandates on the people that just turned the majority of Conservative supporters against him. And as he said, he was going to look for a new base. Well, he didn't find one.
With the UCP as divided as it is right now, do you think this will help bolster more support for your group, the Alberta Wildrose Independence Party?
Well, ultimately, absolutely. But the sad thing is, whenever you're in a broken, toxic, dysfunctional relationship, when the one person says, "Oh, I'm sorry," and backs out, human nature is that, "Oh, we're going to go back in and try and fix it." We've been trying to fix Confederation for 115, 117 years. It's not working. We actually need to stand up for Albertans. We can't have a prime minister or the World Health Organization of the United Nations saying that we're going to shut down your oil sands, we're going to shut down your beef industry, we're going to impose health restrictions and regulations on you. We actually need to be strong and free. And the UCP, in their background, that they're a federalist party, and they're not going to stand up for Alberta. And I don't think any new candidates coming forward are going to do that within the party.
Paul Hinman, leader of the Wildrose Independence Party of Alberta, thanks so much for your time today. Federal Tourism Minister and Edmonton MP Randy Boissonnault says he believes Jason Kenney was pushed out of the UCP for not being extreme enough. Boissonnault, a Liberal, says Conservative politics are headed to a very dark place.
I'm sensing a disturbing trend in Conservative politics in Canada and across the country. Mr. Kenney was pushed out of his party because he wasn't extreme enough. And just 6 months ago, we saw that happen to Mr. O'Toole at the federal level. And just yesterday, we saw Mr. Fass resign his finance critic role because he critiqued Pierre Poilievre in the leadership race. So the Conservative movement in this country is heading to a dark place. And I find that very troubling. And at a time when we are in Alberta trying to recover from, a downturn in oil, now it's getting better, but we have real issues in Alberta and we need real leadership. And so I really do think that it's time for the moderates in Conservative movements in this country to step up and ask themselves, where's this train going?
Well, we had some very good news for many of our farmers and ranchers across southwestern Alberta today as we saw some much-needed moisture. Jeanette Rocher is in now with an early peek at the forecast. Jeanette, will that rain be sticking around?
Yeah, it should stick around through this evening and even into tomorrow, Hal, as we can be looking at another 30% a chance of showers on our Friday. Temperatures a lot chillier than they should be as well. Not quite seasonal. So we're only seeing a high of 8 degrees tomorrow. So we're going to want to continue to dress in those layers over tonight and into tomorrow. Winds gusting up to 40 kilometers per hour as well from the north. So that's the start of our long weekend. After that, mainly sunny skies ahead of us. I'll have all those details coming up for you later on in the show.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. The Lethbridge Police Service is reminding us to always lock up and secure our bicycles. The LPS is targeting bike thieves through a community crime initiative. Earlier this week, police were able to use a bike bait technique and managed to arrest an offender who stole a bike after it was locked to a street sign. Police are also encouraging us to always lock up our bikes and to not leave them unattended when they're unlocked.
We recognize that there's a myriad of different locks out there and things like that. Those U-bolt locks seem to be the best deterrent. This is the most difficult to break through, to kind of cut off, things like that. Ensure that your bikes are placed up against or attached to an immovable object. Not trees, some fence posts, things like that are sometimes not the best, as they can be removed, thus can kind of bring the bike away with them. Well-lit areas, heavy traffic, ensuring that, especially at nighttime, if the criminals can't see the bike, they can't steal the bike. So to have them in a locked shed, possibly bring them inside the home, things like that.
So far this year, 95 bikes have been reported stolen. Last year, 500 bikes were taken, and so far, only around 123 bikes were found and returned to their owners. The City of Lethbridge celebrated their public employees on Thursday. Now, this week marks Public Works Week in Alberta, and the city manager for the City of Lethbridge says it's important to thank the hardworking employees here in the Windy City.
People don't wake up thinking about, will I have drinking water? Is the drinking water safe? What do I do with my garbage? Or where does the water go when I turn on the tap? Those types of things that are largely unseen. That's exactly the way it should be, is effective public works. And that's the importance of the staff and the work that they do.
Public Works Week started off with the city hosting the Big Truck Petting Zoo on May the 14th. The annual Target Hunger Food Drive is coming up next month, and this year there's a need for volunteers. On the second Saturday of June, volunteers will be coming around picking up food donations from local residents. Danielle McIntyre with the Interfaith Food Bank says they need the volunteers especially for Collection Day, and donations of non-perishable food items are always welcome.
This time we're really recruiting volunteers to help us fill all of the routes throughout the city to deliver and pick up those bags. We need to recruit our volunteers for the month of May, and then they'll be out delivering the bags in the first week of June. Pick up on Saturday, June the 11th. We're definitely looking for those most wanted non-perishable items, but there is also the opportunity to go to our website and donate financial gifts online.
Now, if you're interested in volunteering for the food drive, more information can be found on our website, bridgecitynews.ca. Well, the gates have finally opened and officially opened in Ikiyuko Japanese Garden for the summer season. This is the first season with the garden's new Bunka Center open to the public. The center is a space that offers lots of exhibits and daily programming. Officials at Ikiyuko say they can host events like indoor wedding receptions at the center, adding that they've been recognized provincially as one of the top 10 North American gardens worth seeing.
Being an outside location has served us well through COVID, being able to have things outdoors, but it also doesn't lend us very well if the weather is poor. So this gives us a backup location as well as a larger indoor space that we can host more events. We can now host wedding receptions. Previously we just did ceremonies in the garden, but now people can actually have their ceremony in the garden and they can have their reception right here in the Bunka Center.
Last year, we had the most visitors that we've had at the garden for a long time, approximately 44,000. We had 18.5% increase in the visitation of the Winter Light Festival. We've been nominated as the community's best attraction by the Alberta Chamber of Commerce Association. So to be recognized on such a provincial level brings such pride and excitement to the Ikiyuko team.
I like that footage of the Winter Light Festival. It's pretty nice. The Bunka Center will have an official grand opening on July 14th, which will also be the 55th anniversary of Ikiyuko. Prosecutors believe that the organizer of the Freedom Convoy, Tamara Litch, should go back to jail until her trial for breaching her bail conditions. Litch was initially denied bail after her arrest during the massive trucker protest in Ottawa last February. She was released in March after that decision was reviewed. The Crown says Litch has violated one of her bail conditions by accepting an award from the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, a nonprofit group that supported the convoy. BC Hydro says heavy rain and strong winds knocked out power to 121,000 customers yesterday. Crews worked to restore electricity to more than half of those customers on the Lower Mainland, Vancouver Island, the Gulf Islands, and the Sunshine Coast. The utility says some of the hardest hit areas included Nanaimo, Duncan, and Qualicum Beach. BC Hydro says the repair work will continue over the next few days. A judge in Manitoba has ruled that the province violated the Charter of Rights and Freedoms by holding back hundreds of millions of dollars from child welfare agencies. The former NDP government started the clawback of the federal allowance in 2006, and the PC government allegedly continued the practice for 3 years until stopping it in 2019. The Tory government also introduced a bill aimed at preventing any lawsuits over the clawback. Indigenous child welfare agencies took the matter to court, and Court of Queen's Bench Justice James Edmund has ruled in their favour. 2 of Ontario's 4 main political party leaders have tested positive for COVID-19. NDP leader Andrea Horwath and Green Party leader Mike Schreiner both made the announcement. The 2 leaders are now campaigning remotely as they isolate themselves in line with public health rules. Conservative leader Doug Ford and Liberal leader Stephen Del Duca both say they've tested negative. The 18-year-old who has been charged with murdering 10 black people at a supermarket in Buffalo, New York, briefly appeared in court on Thursday after a grand jury indicted him on a first-degree murder charge. Peyton Gendron wore an orange jumpsuit and wore a mask as he silently listened to the charge being read out. In all, 13 people were shot during the mass shooting. Police are also investigating if hate and terrorism-related charges should be added. It was a throwback to the 1980s with Game 1 of the Battle of Alberta on Wednesday night as the Calgary Flames defeated the Edmonton Oilers 9-6. The Flames now lead the best-of-7 affair 1-0. Matthew Tkachuk led the Flames with a hat trick. Tkachuk says his team was happy with the win, but what we saw really wasn't Flames hockey.
Probably our worst game of the playoffs so far, so we got super lucky. That's just not the recipe for success. Maybe we win this one, but we're not going to win anymore if we're going to, play like that. So thought we had a great start. Second period really got away from us. And then, I think once we got a lead in the third, we played a little bit better. But just, we got to be better with leads. And we had a 4-goal lead twice. That should be enough in playoffs. So we'll be better next game.
There's a lot to take away from this game. I think it was a really good start by our team. Couldn't ask for a better start. But you got to have that killer mindset, and you got to be able to put teams down and keep pushing them down. And like you said, I think we made some mental mistakes in the second period, got away from our checking game a little bit. The good news is it's correctable. We can go back to the drawing board tomorrow, and as long as guys are willing to look in the mirror and take some responsibility for what happened in that period, we're going to be fine. We're going to regroup, get back to our game. That's not our style of game. 9-6. It's great that we got Game 1 win, but there's a lot to dissect here, and we'll get to work tomorrow.
Yeah, Game 2 on Friday night. Looking forward to that. Well, we had lots of cloud cover here today in southwestern Alberta with some rain, but will the rain continue? We'll have all the details coming up with a full look at the forecast in just a moment. We had some light showers in Lethbridge today, and that trend may continue for the short term. Jeanette Rocher is in now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, we finally received that much-needed moisture to water our trees and lawns.
Yeah, that's true. We were actually expecting about 10 millimeters of rain, and that rain will continue into this evening overnight, looking at another 30% chance of showers for Friday. High of only 8 degrees tomorrow, much below seasonal. Up to 9 degrees on Saturday with a mix of sun and cloud as those clouds start to part ways for the lovely sunshine on a Sunday. 15 degrees, back up to the high there. On Monday, Victoria Day, sunshine and 18 degrees. That's more like it. 19 degrees on Tuesday and a high of 21 next Wednesday with a mix of sun and clouds. So we're definitely going to get cooler before we get warmer. Seasonal high for this time of year, 19 degrees. 5 is our average low. 30 was our high temperature on this day back in 1964. And in 2003, we were sitting at minus 6 degrees. I feel bad complaining about the 8 degrees now. Look at where we were in 2003. 5:42 is when the sun rose this morning, and our sunset this evening at 9:14 p.m., giving us 15 hours and 32 minutes of daylight. Okay, a bit windy tomorrow on the west coast. Victoria experiencing winds up to 30 kilometers per hour, particularly in that Juan de Fuca Strait. 13 degrees the high there with mainly cloudy skies. Mix of sun and cloud in Vancouver, high of 15. 11 the high in Edmonton tomorrow. Calgary looking at a chance of showers mixed with flurries, high of only 7 degrees there. In Saskatoon, mix of sun and clouds, 7 the high. Winds kicking up to about 50 kilometers per hour. Expecting periods of rain in Regina, 6 degrees the high there. 8 the high in Winnipeg, also expecting some showers. Could be mixed with some flurries and up to about 60 kilometer per hour winds in Winnipeg. Toronto, look at that lovely temperature, 29 degrees. Looking at humidity, lots of moisture, chance of showers. Mix of sun and cloud in Ottawa, 23 the high, 22 the high in Montreal, with periods of rain expected there as well. As we look to the east coast, 19 in Fredericton, 16 the high in Halifax, 17 the high in Charlottetown tomorrow, and a lovely 16 degrees and some sunshine to start the weekend out there in St. John's, Newfoundland. There you have it. That is your forecast.
The Trudeau Liberals have joined Canada's closest intelligence allies in banning Huawei technologies from fifth-generation wireless networks. Officials say the Chinese state-owned telecommunications firm poses a threat to Canada's national security. Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne says ZTE Corp's equipment will also be prohibited. Firms that already have Huawei or ZTE gear installed will have to remove it. The long-awaited announcement will be welcomed by the U.S. Biden administration, which alleged Huawei gear would allow the Chinese government to interfere with 5G networks. A new study from the University of Toronto says more Canadians could be at risk of going hungry due to high inflation. The rising inflation may increase the prevalence and severity of food insecurity here in Canada. Stats Can also says consumers paid 9.7% more for food in stores in April compared with the same time last year. That is the largest increase since September of 1981. The 2020 Canadian Income Survey found that 11.2% of Canadians experience moderate to severe food insecurity. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 80 points on the day to finish at 20,181. The Dow was down 236 points to 31,253. The S&P 500 was down 22 points to 3,900, and the Nasdaq was down 29 on the day to 11,388. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up $2.62 to $112.21 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 6 cents to $8.31 US. Gold was up 9 cents to $18.41.95 US an ounce, and silver was even on the day at $21.92 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $16.73 per bushel, barley's at $10.34, canola's at $26.12, and corn is at $12.55 per bushel. Live cattle were unchanged at $131.50. Feeder cattle were down $1.73 to $154.13, and lean hogs were down 80 cents to $105.30. The Canadian dollar was even over the past 24 hours at 77.98 US. Recapping one of our top stories, the leadership race has officially begun with Jason Kenney's announcement that he's stepping down as leader of the United Conservative Party in Alberta. A couple of candidates have already put their names forward to succeed Kenney as party leader. They are former Wildrose Party leader Brian Jean and Danielle Smith, who crossed the floor from the Wildrose to join the then PC Party of Alberta under Premier Jim Prentice. The city of Lethbridge has seen a number of home fires recently. Now, what's causing the blazes? And what can you do to better protect yourself and your family from a fire developing in your home? Troy Hicks, Fire Prevention Officer with the City of Lethbridge Fire Department, has some safety tips for us in just a moment. Residential fires can be so devastating to families. Even if there are no injuries or fatalities, you could lose everything. But too often, they are deadly, and many of those fires are preventable. Joining us now to discuss fire prevention and safety is Troy Hicks. He's the Fire Prevention Officer with the City of Lethbridge Fire Department. Troy, welcome back to Bridge City News.
Thank you very much for having me again.
Now, Troy, there have been a number of fires here in Lethbridge over the past year. What has been the number one cause of these blazes? Is maybe people not properly disposing of their cigarettes?
Yeah, you know what, Hal? Every year, we usually run into the same types of fires. This year, though, 2022, and even last year, 2021, we have definitely seen an increase in improper disposal of smoking materials. I don't know, maybe because of COVID, so many more people were home and different things like this, working from home. But yeah, we have definitely seen an increase in smoking material fires.
So where are people actually disposing of their smokes? They're putting them in plant pots? Like, what are they doing with them?
Absolutely. We have everything from planters, or we've had issues with plastic buckets that the person thought there was water in. We've even had issues with people using a proper ashtray, but it's an ashtray that's meant for indoors, not outdoors, and they'll have it on their back patio. We all know the winds here in southern Alberta, and they go outside, they have their cigarette, they put it out, but it's not really out. And once they go back inside, the wind picks up, blows those embers around, and whether it's a lawn chair or anything like that, it catches it on fire.
Are there still incidents as well of people maybe smoking in bed, falling asleep with a cigarette in their hands?
In my time here, I haven't seen that type of fire in years. It's always been just improperly disposed of when they're putting them out.
Now, Troy, we also often see a lot of grass fires here in southwestern Alberta, especially when it's so dry. Are many of those fires caused by people maybe tossing their cigarette out the window?
Absolutely. We see it every day. I see it when I drive home, up down the coulees and stuff like that. I see it on the highway. I can't 100% say that every fire on the side of the highway is caused by that. We could have anything from sparks from maybe trucks with their brakes are locked on, or train tracks or something as well. But definitely a large percentage of them are from people throwing cigarettes out their window.
So how can you educate people more as to some of the causes of the fires and what we can do to prevent those fires, such as not throwing your cigarette out the window?
Absolutely. No, we will put out media releases. I actually put out a media release here in the city yesterday about planters, and just it's not meant to be. When it comes to the highways, we have other provinces here in Canada that there's actually fines. People can contact the police, take the license plate number down, and people are issued very hefty fines for throwing cigarettes and stuff outside their windows. It is something that's been discussed here in Southern Alberta and in Lethbridge in particular. It's not in effect yet. I don't think it's a bad idea. We just need people to realize, unfortunately, we're a society of people that think, oh, it's not going to happen to me. And, I used to be one of those people too, until I started in this profession. And now, it does happen, and it happens a lot, and we can educate as much as we can. But the whole goal is eventually to try to maybe not completely get rid of these types of fires, but at the very least, lower the numbers and just continue to educate more people.
Speaking of education, Troy, how important is it really for parents to speak to young people and their kids about the dangers of using matches and lighters?
Oh, absolutely. We actually have had a couple fires already this year, just caused by curious children that, maybe a lighter was sitting on a table and mom and dad weren't watching, or the babysitter wasn't watching, and they're just like, oh, I seen dad play with this. Yesterday, I had a 12-year-old boy here in my office, and it's not that he's done something wrong. His mom was just concerned about, she didn't feel he respected being around a fire pit enough and the dangers of a fire pit. So I sat here and I talked to him for about a half hour, and he was a great young man. And I educated him. I showed him the fire trucks, and I think he left here maybe realized a bit more like, hey, you know what? This is important. I do need to be respectful for this kind of stuff.
Are there any statistics available as to how many families actually have a fire evacuation plan in place? And what are some of the key steps with an evacuation plan?
As for numbers here in the city, it's been a long time since we've been in the schools because of COVID, but I'm starting to get appointments booked, so we are getting back in to educate. I find that the numbers are quite high when I go to schools, particularly say from kindergarten till about grade 3 or 4. I'm happy with the numbers of people that tell me that, yes, they do have fire safety plans. When we do things like any public education event, like we're at the Home and Garden Expo this year, I did have some parents come up to say how nice it was to see us, and actually asked me if I could go over their plan with them. For anybody else that doesn't have one, or maybe someone that wants to do one, there's a few things you really need to hit. Make sure everyone in your house knows what to do when the smoke detector goes off. They have an escape plan. They need to, if their bedrooms are up on the second floor, they can either go down the stairs or whatever they have to do to get out. And they need to have a meeting place. Your meeting place should not be hopefully crossing a road just because of traffic. You want to be careful with that. And if you also have a fenced-in backyard, you don't really want your meeting place to be in the backyard, because now you're trapped back there if the fire gets out of control. But there is lots of things. People can contact me at the fire department, and I can definitely give them as much information as they like for their home safety plan.
In the past, when I've spoken to firefighters, they say when you go to bed at night with your bedroom door, always keep it closed. Can you explain why that's so important?
For sure. Even the normal bedroom doors, they're not necessarily what you would call a fire door, which what we see in apartment buildings and hotels and stuff. But even a normal bedroom door, fire needs oxygen in order to burn. In order to keep a fire burning, there has to be enough oxygen. Oxygen is even more important than the fuel. So by closing that door, you are mitigating the amount of oxygen that fire could have. So whether the fire starts in the room, it'll keep it in that room. But if you're in your room sleeping and the fire's out in the hallway or out in something like that, by you having that door closed, you're going to keep all flame, heat, and smoke from getting into your room for a significant amount of time. Therefore, if you can't make it outside, maybe the fire is directly outside your door. Well, you have time to stay in your room. Hopefully, if you have a phone, you can call 911 and let us know what room you're in. Or if you don't, you open up your window and you make sure your neighbors know where you are. And when we arrive to put that fire out, we are coming straight to your window to get you out of there.
And if you have an ensuite bath, I guess you can roll up a towel, a wet towel, throw it under the door to prevent a lot of the smoke from coming in, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, every little bit helps because, as we always say, every second matters, right? So
now, Troy, when there's a fire and you have kids and your pets and you're ready to evacuate, what else should you really grab in a fire? Maybe some photo albums, special memories, or how about hockey card collections?
You know what, Hal? I was looking at your questions this morning, and I could definitely see where you're coming from. Rule of thumb, especially as far as the fire department's concerned, you get your family, you get out. We even educate people that one thing I will say, when a smoke detector goes off, as much as we don't like that sound, pets hate it even more. And chances are your pets are going to hide. If they're not right beside you to take them out as you're leaving, you need to leave. We don't recommend you go back in and get your pets. If you have a fire in your home and the fire department shows up and you and all your family members are outside, not calling the pets, not being a family member, but you and your kids are outside, if you let us know that there's a pet inside, we're going inside that building just the same way we would if it was you or your child or anyone in the house, and we're going to try to save that pet.
Are there stickers that we can put on our windows saying, hey, there are pets inside of our home?
I have seen them around. You know, there's a kennel here in Lethbridge that I take my dog on the south side. They have magnets and stickers around. I believe I've seen them at some of the other department stores and home hardware stores, things like that here in the city as well. So,
Troy, how common are kitchen fires? And are they fires tied in with a faulty appliance such as a stove or microwave, or maybe simply cooking that's gotten out of control, like when I usually cook?
Yeah, me as well. I keep telling myself that the smoke detector is not my timer. But, you know, when I first started here, Hal, 10 plus years ago, kitchen fires were our number one type. They were the number one type here in the city. Over the last few years, that has changed. We are a lot more into smoking fires, electrical fires, things like that. But the number one types of kitchen fires we receive is, say, people not paying attention when they're cooking, unattended, people leaving their kitchen, leaving their stove. I know we're a busy society. You know, we're a technological society. We're always on our phones or computers or on TV or video games. We just need to remind people that when you're cooking, you need to remember you're cooking. And that's even in the kitchen and or outside of your barbecue. It needs to be attended. You need to be paying attention. We do sometimes have fires caused by old faulty appliances. 90% of the time with those, though, it turns into be an electrical fire, because lots of times what it is it's the electrical cord or something like that that's just it's not covered, it's not doing well, it overheats, and that's what catches fire. And then the stove is actually a victim of the fire and not the cause.
How about some of the older, smaller appliances that we leave plugged in? Let's say maybe a toaster or even a hairdryer when we take off, go to work, and maybe go on holidays. Could they also maybe potentially cause a fire?
The risk is always there. I experienced a fire many, many years ago with a coffee pot. Just the power surged. It was a very older home. The power surged and the coffee pot actually caught on fire. Wasn't a lot of damage. Everyone was fine, but it did. Ever since then, the only thing that stays plugged in when I leave my home, other than just for work, but when I leave for any amount of time, the only thing that stays plugged in is my fridge or freezer. Unplug everything else. And that's not to make people nervous. We need to remind people, if your house is wired properly, we also remind people, you know what, use a proper CSA approved power bar that has surge protection. That will help you with that. But you know what? Why have stuff plugged in if you're not using it? So things like a coffee pot, toaster, I can tell you right now, mine at home are not plugged in. We have not had a lot of issues here in the city of Lethbridge, but even when it comes to phone chargers, if you're not charging your phone, unplug it. Don't leave it in. Anything that's plugged in, electricity produces heat, and it leaves that slight opportunity that something could happen. I mean, most electrical outlets don't just burst into flames, but it could come down to anything. There could be dust on it. There could be, maybe it's very close to curtains that may be like very thin curtains or shears that could be close to it, that radiant heat from the plug could catch them on fire. So I've always lived in the habit, and I have a 21-year-old son that I've taught him since he was very young as well. As far as I know, he still leaves everything unplugged as well.
So Troy, how much time do we typically have to evacuate a home before maybe flames or smoke overtake us?
You know what, that is a great question. When I was looking at your list, I thought that was fantastic. With the amount of materials and stuff used now to make new furniture, it's not exaggerating when we say every second counts. Years ago, even if we say as much as 10 to 15 years ago, by the time something ignited in your home, it took a few minutes before the smoke to get thick enough to set off the detector. And once that went off, you still had 5-6 minutes to get out. Nowadays, with new furniture and the amount of products and petroleum products that are in furniture, the smoke is so toxic you need to get out as fast as you can. To put a number on it, I would say when your smoke detector goes off, you need to be out of that house within 2 minutes. And that's just really trying to train people and remind people that, you know what, treat it as real. That smoke detector goes off, you get out and you make your way out the door. So, it's a good idea. Just make sure your exit doors are always clear. Don't have 50 pairs of shoes in front of your doors that's going to stop something. Don't try to search for different things like we spoke of earlier, photo albums and stuff like that. If you get out of that place properly and you close the door, you have your doors closed, there's a good chance that fire is not going to spread and not going to damage too much of your home. And I know it's hard. Listen, I've spoken to so many families that have had fires, and obviously they're in a horrible point of their day in their lives. And I just try to reiterate to them, say, you know what though, you're still here hugging your child, you're still alive. It's just stuff. It can be redone. And there's quite a few times actually that even after a structure fire, we can send some of our firefighters in. The homeowners have asked us to go in to look for passports or maybe an urn and some of that. And 9 times out of 10, we do find it. We bring it out and give it to them. So the biggest thing that we just want people to realize is you need to get out. As soon as you hear that smoke detector, teach your kids, teach everybody in the home that it's real. You need to get out, and the importance of making sure they work. Smoke detectors have expiry dates. They're only good for 10 years.
It seems like a lot of home builders these days are building more 2.5 story, even 3-story homes. Do you think we should maybe have a rope ladder available in some of those higher homes?
I actually had a lady call me the other day and ask me that same question. And rope ladders are good. They are very good. And if you, the family member that you're going to put that rope ladder in, if you feel safe and trusting that they can use that ladder, then fantastic. I agree with that. That's okay. The biggest thing to remember with those rope ladders, though, is they are rated for a certain weight. And they're actually used once and they're no good anymore. So if you have one of those in, you can't train with it. You can't practice with it. It's just you have to be able to use it. So lots of times what I tell people is we don't want people breaking windows, jumping out of windows, things like that. If you're on your second floor or even your third floor and you hear your smoke detector go off, it's just like we were all told when we were kids, and I teach the young kids at school now, you touch the door with the back of your hand because hopefully you're sleeping with your door closed. If it's not too hot, you open it. If you open it and there's just smoke in front of you, take a t-shirt, something, cover your mouth, get down nice and low, crawl down the stairs, go down on your belly, on your butt, whatever you have to do, and you need to be able to get out. If you open that door and there's flames in front of you, like I said earlier, that's when you just close the door. If you have a towel or a sweater or something you can jam on the bottom, do that. Either call 911 or open your window and start yelling so people know where you are, and that's the first place we're going.
Now, every spring and fall, when we have a time change, we're always reminded to check the batteries and our smoke detectors here. What about carbon monoxide detectors? Should we have one on every level of our home, Troy?
You know what? It's definitely not. It's such case dependent on that. Like I have a carbon monoxide detector in my home, and I have it in my basement. I have it outside my furnace room, my laundry room, things like that. I always tell people that if they have something, like, you need to think of the different areas in your home where you could possibly get carbon monoxide. So, like if where you have your furnace room, where you have things like that, you can have it down there. If you have a natural gas fireplace or anything like that in your home, or even a wood burning fireplace, definitely a good idea to have one on that level. I also tell people that have an attached garage, it's a good idea to have a carbon monoxide detector just outside the door that goes into their attached garage. We all, like I said, we're all so busy. Sometimes we forget. We've had issues with people warming up their vehicles in their attached garage with the door closed. We've had people coming home from work 3 o'clock in the morning. They go into the garage, they shut the garage door, they go in and they forget to shut their car off. So it's so important to have those carbon monoxide detectors, absolutely. And it's the same thing with those. Batteries you need to change every year as well.
Now, before we let you go here, let's talk a bit about fire extinguishers for a home. There are different types for, grease fires, for electrical fires. What's the best type of fire extinguisher that people can have in their house?
People need to have an ABC extinguisher. Now, a Class A fire is just your ordinary combustibles, wood, paper, anything like that. A Class B is a fuel or flammable liquid fire, and a Class C is an electrical fire. There is a Class K extinguisher out there that is used for kitchen grease fires, but it's not a grease fire at home. It's a grease fire in a restaurant that works in conjunction with the suppression system that's already in the restaurant over the deep fryers. Even if you deep fry every day at home, you don't need it. What people need to remember is an ABC extinguisher will put out all those types of fires. What's in an ABC extinguisher is baking soda. So if someone doesn't have one, or even if they do, maybe have a couple boxes of baking soda around as well. And when you're cooking, have a lid beside you. It's not attended. If all of a sudden something catches on fire, you can either grab the extinguisher or just cover it with the lid, shut the burner off and move it off the burner. But so important. And one last thing I'd like to say about cooking, where a lot of times we have, if you ever do have a fire inside your oven, or inside your microwave, don't panic. Just hit the power button. Don't open the door. If you open the door, that rush of oxygen is going to make that fire get even bigger. If you leave the door closed and just hit the power button, there's not enough oxygen there to support the combustion, and that fire will go out in seconds. You're going to have to give your oven or your microwave a good clean, but at least your house is still standing and nothing has spread.
Troy Hicks, Fire Prevention Officer with the City of Lethbridge Fire Department. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thanks again for having me, Hal. I really appreciate it.
A number of our viewers tend to be Christians, but if we did a survey, I wonder how many of us are actually brave enough and knowledgeable enough to share the gospel with others. Our guest today has some things to share on this. Dave Starrett is the founder of Disruptive Truth, a ministry that prepares churches and ministries in evangelistic outreach and cultural engagement. He's also author of the book Jesus Conversations, Effective Everyday Engagement, available at disruptivetruth.com. Dave, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you, Hal, for having me on your show.
Absolutely. Now, please give our viewers a bit of a snapshot or an overview of what your book is really all about.
Hal, I wrote this book, Jesus Conversations, as an encouragement to primarily Christians who don't know what to say when the conversation turns to religion. And, we're in a time in which, with everything from COVID to mandates to what is the basis of your morality and where do ethics come from, there's a time in which we just struggle with conversations and how to talk about it. Well, I believe that the most important conversation that we can have is about Jesus. But often Christians will feel awkward and say, well, how do I talk about Jesus to someone who doesn't believe in the Bible, or someone who says, well, that's just true for you, but not true for me? Well, I wanted to write this book to be an encouragement to Christians, to equip Christians to know how to talk about Jesus, to give the greatest hope to people who do not believe the way we do.
Now, I understand that some people may feel that there's a lack of evangelism by Christians today. Do you think that's more about maybe people are a little uncomfortable coming out of their shell, or is it more to do with the pandemic? Can you explain why that is?
Well, I think it has to do with the ideas and the worldview that a lot of people have embraced. We have allowed our children to be indoctrinated from a very early age from our schools to believe ideas that are contrary to the gospel. And as a result, sometimes as parents, we have not done our job to equip their minds to know why to believe what they believe about religion, about God, about Jesus, about the resurrection. Second, I think our churches have embraced this kind of seeker-sensitive movement where we want to create these environments just to attract the lost. And I think in one sense, that's good that we create these environments that an unbeliever wants to attend or wants to kind of check out this experience. But what we have lacked in is discipleship. A study done by Barna in 2019 says that out of millennials, 47% who profess to be Christians, 47% believe that evangelism or proselytizing is wrong. There's this idea that to persuade someone that Christianity is true in the hope of them embracing the truth of Christ's death and resurrection and free gift of salvation, there's this idea that this is morally wrong. And so I wanted to overcome that and say that this is good news. And if Christ has forgiven us, we should be able to share that message with other people.
Dave, do you think maybe we tend to think that our neighbors and coworkers are probably not interested in knowing more about the gospel and Jesus?
Sometimes we assume that. We think that this person just is not interested. But we live and we must be reminded that the people that we work with often will never step foot in church. They may never hear our pastor, but God will allow us in our jobs. I work a full-time job in sales, and there are people that I interact with in my day-to-day interactions. I'm not a professional preacher. I do this on the side, but there are people around us all the time who do not believe the way we do. And God has called us. The Great Commission, how Jesus said it was to not just to the 12 disciples, but to a whole crowd of other followers. And Jesus said, all authority has been given unto me. Go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to observe everything I've taught you. And so evangelism is part of that Great Commission. Evangelism, teaching, equipping. And so I believe this is something that we can all do. And so this book with Jesus Conversations, I thought in churches, if we can gather in small groups, if we can talk about this amongst a small group, I really believe that this book can equip Christians to talk about Jesus to people who do not believe the way we do.
Dave, I know some people that say, I don't know my Bible inside and out. I don't know all of the scriptures. I have to feel like I'm really led by the Holy Spirit before I can reach out to people. So what do you say to those who think that they need to have all of the right answers before sharing the gospel of Jesus?
Well, we certainly know that in Scripture, Jesus used people who didn't know all the answers. When Jesus met the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman, she just started with the information that she knew, and she went back to her town and they were changed. When Paul, the apostle, who was very trained intellectually, he was writing the church of Corinth, he said, hey, look, think about it, what you were when most of you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standards, but God chose the foolish things to shame the wise. So I just say, pray, go, grow as you go. As we get out there and we just start conversations, we can learn along the way, and we should learn along the way. If someone asks us a question that we don't know the answer to, we can tell our friend, look, I don't know the answer to that, but I'll go get an answer. I'll go study that. Would you like to study with me? And then we can take that conversation further towards the truth.
So explain really how apologetics is important when it comes to evangelism.
Well, apologetics is a Greek word that simply means to give a defense. This is a word that is used multiple times in the New Testament. When Peter writes in 1 Peter 3:15, always be prepared to give an answer to anyone who asks you, to give a reason for the hope you have, but do this with gentleness and respect. And so when someone asks us, when they ask us a question like, why do you believe in God? Or why do you believe the Bible is true? Or how can you believe that Jesus is the only way? Or how can you believe in a literal hell? When we give an answer to these questions, we're giving a defense for why we believe something is true. And Paul, he says this in Philippians chapter 1, he said, I was out defending and confirming the gospel. And so if we believe anything, say we believe something about, like my full-time job is in helping cancer patients. If I believe that a treatment is better for a particular doctor, I want to provide a peer-reviewed article. I want to provide evidence that shows that this precision medicine, this particular type of treatment is good for this particular type of cancer. And I think we have something worse in our life, and that is sin. That has separated us from God. And so there's a lot of people who don't believe in Jesus, but we can give a defense. And so I wrote this book, Jesus Conversations, to help Christians just to get started in initiating conversations and then also providing answers without even using the Bible.
I have another friend of mine who's in the media who's not a believer, and she asked me, she says, you always say that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, that no one comes to the Father except through me. I mean, that's right from the Bible itself. She says, I don't believe that. There's got to be other ways to God outside of just Jesus. So what do you say to somebody like that?
Well, first of all, one of the things I do in this book, and I've adapted this from a book called Tactics, Greg Kokel, but I've expanded, is if somebody brings in an objection, first of all, I say, well, why do you believe there's multiple paths? You can first ask that person, well, what do you mean by that? And then why do you believe that? And then you could ask also, well, what about in other areas? Or you could even bring out particular religions that they disagree with. So are you saying that if there's multiple paths to get to God, that you believe that the fundamental Baptist who believes that all homosexuals are going to hell, you believe that they're going to heaven? You just bring in some example like that they will disagree with and see what they say. Very soon that person will start saying, well, no, I don't believe that Hitler's going to heaven. I don't believe that judgmental bigot is going to heaven. And then you can ask them, well, why do they believe that? Why do you even believe in a heaven? And so if the person who says there is no truth, one of the tools that I use in this is if someone says there is no one way, or there is no truth, you can ask them, well, is that true that there is no truth? If you affirm that all paths are equally true, does that mean that my position that differs from your position, is that equally true to your position? Very soon, this person might go back and start, contradicting themselves. The evidence of the resurrection is overwhelming. I'll provide that in the book. And if Jesus Christ did rise again from the dead, which he did historically, then he has every right to say, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me.
Amen. Now, how would you define conversational evangelism, Dave?
Conversations is just being willing to take an initiation with someone. I use this acronym called SALT, S-A-L-T. You S, start a conversation. A, ask questions. L, we listen. Then T, we tell the story. We tell our own testimony. We can work on that, but we also tell the story of the gospel, which is the most important story. And so I just encourage people. I know it's hard with wearing the mask and all the things that our culture is going through, but if we can just begin by saying hi to people around us, to just start conversations and ask questions. If someone believes in something like maybe that all paths are equally true, we ask questions. Well, why do you believe that all paths are equally true? And then after we listen to them and we ask questions, we ask follow-up questions, then we can, that allows us to then tell our story. And that allows us to tell the person what Jesus has done in our life and then proclaim the greatest message, and that is the gospel.
Now, Dave, you're right that before anyone can actually receive the good news, they need to understand that there's a problem. What problem specifically can you explain?
Well, the problem is sin, right? You know, in my full-time day job, I have a lot of treatment for particular cancers, lung cancer patients who have a mutation called PD-L1. But I have a treatment that I sell for that and that I help a lot of patients. But that treatment wouldn't make any sense if that cancer patient did not have that particular mutation. Well, in our lives, we have something that is worse than cancer, and that is sin. The Bible says that we have all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. If someone says, well, I've never sinned, then we can often reflect on the 10 commandments. For example, the commandment that says, thou shalt not murder. But Jesus takes it a whole step further when he says that if any of you has been angry with his brother, he's committed murder in your heart. If someone says, well, I haven't done too much that is bad, you can ask them, well, what about the 10 commandments? Have you ever told a lie before? What about adultery? Jesus said, if anyone has looked at a woman with lust in your heart, you've committed adultery in your heart. The truth is that we've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And then I train people in Jesus' conversations how to go through the Romans road. Romans 6:23 says, for the wages of sin is death. So the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life through Christ Jesus our Lord. And so the good news is that even though the wage for our sin is spiritual death and physical death, God has given us good news through the gospel, through Jesus Christ.
Let's talk a bit about servant evangelism. What is that really all about?
Well, around us, there are people that we can look for opportunities to serve them. I know growing up, my father was just really good at taking an initiation to our neighbors, to shovel their driveways, to help rake their leaves, just looking around our neighbors, if they're elderly people, for opportunities to serve them. And when we serve people, that can often allow us to build a relationship of trust. And in those moments, we can proclaim the good news of the gospel. You know, like my parents, my mom is not the most active, outgoing evangelist. She doesn't have a theology degree. But as she was praying, she recently told me that she just kind of felt led by the Lord to bring up the trash cans of her neighbors. And as she did that, she was able to at first they didn't know who was doing it. She has some elderly neighbors and she was just bringing up the trash cans. And they were like, well, who's doing this? And soon word got out that it was my mom. And through that, my parents have been able to minister to their neighbors. And my dad has actually, who's a minister, has done some funerals, and they've been able to share the good news of Jesus in some moments.
Now, you say that sometimes we can spend a little too much time with other believers. Why do you view this as a potential problem?
Well, I think that our closest friends should be believers. Those people that we're growing with, that we're doing life together with, they should be. But there have been seasons in my life where I was, for example, I was working at a Christian school. I was in small group with other Christians. I was in a church basketball league. And most of my friends were all Christians. Now, I think we should be intentional at times, whether it's joining a fitness club or whether it's being intentional with our work, for an intentionality to build relationships with people who do not believe the way we do, to have them into our homes, to have them meet some of our Christian friends. And just by doing life, allow them to come and see what Christ has done in our lives. And so I would always encourage that our closest friends should be believers, those that we're running alongside of. And if they're not believers, if we have friends, I think most people have friends that are not Christians. We should be bold with them. If we truly love our friends, we should tell them the truth about Jesus. That's the greatest hope. That's the greatest gospel. And God will use you in your boldness. Now, it is true that you may lose some friends. And Jesus said, blessed are you when people insult you and persecute you and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For they persecuted the prophets who were before you. So we must be bold. And I think God can use you, the listeners, to win your friends to Jesus. And I would encourage you to read this book with another Christian, to talk about it, to pray for people around you who do not believe the way you do.
Dave Starrett is the author of Jesus Conversations, Effective Everyday Engagement, available at disruptivetruth.com. Dave, thanks for joining us today from Ohio.
Thank you, Al.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and thanks for watching.